if you're not willing to take a little risk, you're just going nowhere.
Yeah.
You are not going anywhere, and you have to be okay with that. You want them to be calculated, right? But eventually you do have to step out. You have to do something, right?
This is the Multifamily Journey Podcast, show 27.
You're listening to the Multifamily Journey Podcast. In this show, you'll hear industry experts share tips of success and failure from their real estate investing journeys. You'll get a transparent look behind the curtain while you learn to fulfill the lifestyle you want to live and achieve your wealth goals. Get ready for the journey to financial freedom through investing in multifamily real estate. Here's your host, Blake Dailey.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Multifamily Journey Podcast. I'm your host, Blake here, and excited to bring another good episode to you today. So I posted about this on social media, but if you haven't heard, the Multifamily Journey Podcast just made it in the top 40 of multifamily investing podcasts on iTunes. So that's a huge milestone for me and a huge testament to the listeners of the show. So thank you for listening. Thank you for rating and giving your good reviews and sharing on social media and everything. Much appreciated, and just trying to continue to provide value to you guys. So if there's something that you want to hear more of or hear less of, let me know, but definitely keep leaving good ratings and reviews that help to keep this show growing. And let's see if, we can't get that in the top 25. So would love to see that, but wanted to also give a little intro of or update of where I am on my journey. So about a month ago, I don't know if I've talked about closing on the 8 unit yet, but about a month ago, closed on that 8 unit. And about the last 3 weeks, we've started the rehab and the demolition and everything. So that project is off and rolling. That's the Burr and B. So I'm going to renovate that thing, making it and furnish it, making it to 8 short-term rental units. It's in downtown Fort Walton Beach, great location, really close to the beach. So I think the demand is going to be huge for those units once they get up and running. So super excited about that. And then 2 weeks ago, we closed on the 66 unit. So that was another huge milestone for me. That was my first syndication. We've begun the operation now, starting to, build the cash flow from the properties to start paying out for investors. And in the trailing 30 days before we closed, collections were super high. I think it was like 96% and 100% occupied. So really strong property, really strong value add play in a great area in Greensboro, North Carolina. So very excited about that as well. So a lot of cool things have been going on. But now I want to introduce our awesome guest on the show today. It's Whitney Sewell. He's the host of the Real Estate Syndication Show. It's a daily podcast. Man, I can't even imagine doing a show every day, but he provides awesome value and content through his brand. He's an Army veteran. He was a police officer once he got done with his military service. And that's when he got started investing in real estate as well, was when he was a full-time police officer. And then he began just had that realization, like many do. He started in small multifamily, like where a lot of people start, and noticed and just kind of realized the inefficiencies of that whole model of, buy a 1 unit or buy a 2 unit and try to scale that way, and went right into buying bigger deals. And how he did that, he's going to tell you today, but was starting the Real Estate Syndication Show before he ever did a syndication. So that's just a big testament to him. He burned the bridges and went all in, and his commitment, you're going to hear about how that propelled him towards success. So a ton of good value today. So we'll get into that. But before we get there, also wanted to share that we've got brand new resources up on multifamilyjourney.com. There's a 12-step guide to get started in multifamily. That's everything that I've done pretty much over the last a year to get into multifamily, and I just use it to close my first deal. So the steps are definitely actionable and something you can do to go replicate success. It's all there for you. So definitely go check that one out. And then if you're interested in just investing on the passive side, being a passive investor, there's also a passive investor toolkit where you can learn things about like how to vet your sponsors, about the deals and everything to look for on the passive side. So definitely check out those 2 resources. They're absolutely free for you, and just want to use those to provide value. And lastly, if you guys like the show, please leave a rating and review. Like I was saying, we just got in the top 40 for Multifamily Podcast. That's huge. So I want to keep that rolling, keep providing awesome content for you guys, and get it out to more people so that they can, get the tips from the guests and follow along this journey and, start their own journey. So super excited for all that. But that's enough of the housekeeping. So let's get into the show with Whitney. Whitney, welcome to the show. It's awesome to have you here.
My pleasure. Happy to be here, Blake.
How's everything in Virginia today?
It's great. It's actually like in the high 50s today, which we've had snow the last 2 weekends. So this is nice.
Yeah, it sounds like about like Panama City weather. And it's very uncharacteristically cold right now. So I'm like bundled up outside, which is not the norm down here. I'm ready to get back to the warmth. But hey, before we get started, I want to just kind of start with your background, give the listeners an idea of who you are, and then we can start in on the real estate stuff.
Of course. Yeah. And I'll go satellite image, version, and you can ask about any part of it you want, but ultimately I was in the military, joined March of 2001 before obviously our country was attacked. And then I ended up spending all of 2005 in Iraq, and thankfully made it home all in one piece. Unfortunately, everyone in my squad did not. And so I'm just very thankful for just the Lord's provision there and allowing me to come home but quickly trying to figure out what I was going to do for a job or career. Transitioned into law enforcement very, very fast. And it was a great transition. I loved being, in policing and I love the structure, the discipline, the uniform. And then quickly also had an income problem. And that's what then, this was around 2008, 2009, this started happening, but it pushed me into real estate at that time. I found out that so many people had built wealth in real estate. I'm like, okay, if, it's not like one person did, thousands of people did. Hundreds of thousands, right? And so if that many people can do it, then there must be something to it. I need to at least learn about it. And so, but I did. I jumped in, bought 2 triplexes, made tons of mistakes, came back. Self-managed, all those things. But being a police officer, I was still searching for something else to change career paths. And I quickly transitioned then into a federal agent, which I worked for the U.S. DOT as a federal agent for about 9 years, 9.5 years, something like that. But at that same time, I was growing our real estate stuff. And then I got up to like a 15 unit and finally learned about syndication. I can't remember how I was exposed to it exactly, maybe through a podcast or whatnot, but I couldn't believe I hadn't known about it so many years before. And then I just jumped in completely. We sold everything else. I actually had another business as well that I was just very passionate about as well, but sold everything, including our farm, everything, to be completely committed to the syndication business, commercial real estate. And so we then, started the daily podcast, and lots happened since then, but happy to dive into any of that, Blake.
That's all good stuff. Yeah. Yeah. First of all, thank you for your service. I have a lot of military guys on the show. Just by the nature of me being in the military, it seems to be that that's where my network starts from. Then the tentacles reach out from there. So awesome to have you on the show and share your story. And it sounds like you started out where a lot of people do with, residential or small multifamily. So just and it even sounds like, did you get 2 15 units or you bought a 15 unit before you ever started syndicating?
A 15 unit.
Okay. Well, that's cool. I think that's, that'd be a good place to dive in and start drilling in, because I think that's, people can start out with the triplex and that's digestible, right? People can wrap their head around, going to get an FHA loan, or for the military folks, a VA loan to get into small multifamily with low down. And I don't know if you went that route with house hacking, but you got to this 15 unit and didn't even syndicate. That seems like intangible for a lot of people. So can you just break down how you went from triplexes to this 15 unit in those early years?
Of course. It wasn't that complicated. However, it was all about, even at that time, it was about partnerships. Even the 2 triplexes, I had an investor, and I would say, I made so many mistakes on that property, but that investor was paid everything he was projected. But we barely broke even on paper, and a lot of brain damage, that's for sure. But we learned a lot. It was our own university, no doubt about it. But that, the 15 unit was a matter of being partnered with the right people as well. I met a guy that's local to me that I started connecting with. We had some other things in common also, but he had probably 150 single family homes in, where I lived. So I thought, wow, he's been doing this a long time, and that wasn't even his main business, as an entrepreneur. And so just started connecting with him, and he really wanted to do multifamily, but he was kind of intimidated by multifamily. Believe it or not, I'm like, are you serious?
Yeah, even though he had all those units just to get into multifamily.
You're right. And so he was kind of intimidated. He's like, you've been studying multifamily. Let's talk about this, And so we did. We found this 15 unit, and we did that together, and that worked out pretty well. But still, I wanted to syndicate. I wanted to be able to do large deals. I wanted to work with lots of investors. I still wanted to be able to scale faster. And that was, I would say he was very, and this is nothing negative about him, but very old school, in lots of ways, and which he's done extremely well. But I just wanted to be able to move faster, than that. And so, he's a great friend, and nothing against him whatsoever, but that's, it was a great experience for he and I. And then I've started, obviously, around that time too, is when we started Life Bridge Capital and started doing larger deals.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I like how you said in there, like, we made a ton of mistakes up front, and I've been this way too. And I think other people are oftentimes like, they're afraid of making those mistakes, so they never get started. So what, like, in those early days, what was your mindset of just going out there and doing it? And it sounded like you, at this point, you're already educating and focused on the bigger multifamily. So what was your mindset behind making those mistakes to, get where you wanted to go?
If you're not willing to take a little risk, you're just going nowhere.
Yeah.
You are not going anywhere, and you have to be okay with that. You want them to be calculated, right? But eventually you do have to step out. You have to do something, right? I mean, and so, there's a book, Who Moved My Cheese, right? Most people listening's probably heard of that book, but there's one thing that my family, there's a kid's version, and I read it to my boys often. Okay. I mean, you can
really
read it. Yeah. I mean, so it's great though. I love reading that to them. I was talking about all them sayings and stuff. And one of them in there that we always talk about is, what would you do if you were not afraid? And so it's like, well, what would you do if you weren't afraid? Well, what kind of fears are holding you back right now? And I mean, so, and I even thought about, like, early on, even now, okay. I mean, we're going to do the best we can, and, all the, everything we have to do in our business. Worst comes to worst, you lose everything. You're still so much better off than most people in this world.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you are, even if you lost your entire business, hopefully your family stays together, all those things, of course. But I just mean financially, if you lost everything financially, even your home, most likely there's still someone in your family, a parent, in-law, somebody or friend that would allow you to live in their house or in their basement or something for a while. Right. So you're probably still going to have, a roof and clothing and food, those things, right? You can go get a job somewhere if you're that motivated. And so I don't want to scare anybody, of course, but I'm just saying, if you don't ever try, what are you going to have? You're going to have what you have right now, right? Or less, most likely.
Yeah.
But you'll never know unless you go after it. And early on, I mean, I got lots of pushback from family because I had probably one of the better jobs that most people in my family had ever had, so that was a big deal for them, for me to say, you know what, I'm leaving this job because I can do so much better over here. That was like, well, are you sure? What? Yeah. I mean, it was a big deal.
I heard the same thing. You probably even heard this, like, when getting out of the military. I hear that all the time. It's like, you're in the military, stay in for 20, do all that. But I think you said something interesting there, is like, a lot of times it's just fear holding you back, or fear that's keeping you in your current position and holding you back from, I don't know, maybe reaching your full potential is a good way to say it. And I like that you had that purview and mindset to just say, what would I do if I wasn't afraid? I think I would, like, get a body glider suit and, like, glide down ravines if I wasn't afraid. But for a lot of people, it's like, I can't get into multifamily, right? Because it's fearful. So from that point, you had this mindset, you had some progress behind you. What led you into these bigger multifamily deals?
Yeah. Again, I started networking. I started meeting lots of people who had only been in the business a year or two, and they were already buying 100 unit, 200 unit buildings. And I'm like, if they can do it, I can do it too. And it wasn't like one or two people, lots of people. Right.
Yeah.
And they build a brand, they build a business, they're partnering with other operators, whatever. I'm like, okay, I can figure this out. And it made a lot of sense to me because I love the structure, the discipline. I love being able to build a professional brand and work with professionals. I didn't enjoy, looking for more tenants and toilets, so much, and trying to find another duplex or another triplex or those things. when I can work with professional investors and work with professional property management, and manage a team of professionals, that even work for us now, it was just much more attractive to me, than what I was doing before in real estate.
That's funny. It's like becoming a professional like yourself, how you present yourself and then your brand and everything, so that you can go and play with the professionals, right? Like, I don't know, you want to go try to just step on a NFL field, you want to go catch passes from Tom Brady if you didn't do, the work up front. And first of all, just believe you can. So that's really good. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but like the podcast was kind of like the start of your journey, right? So how did the podcast play into you getting the start? And the podcast I'm talking about is the Real Estate Syndication Show, which is Whitney's daily podcast. It's a really good show. Definitely go listen to it if you haven't yet. But yeah, how did that play into getting the start into multifamily and becoming the professional?
Yeah. So much about becoming a professional is how you present yourself, right? It is, the military helped with that. Law enforcement helped with that. Being a federal agent, all those things took discipline, took, being accountable to somebody, took just lots of discipline, right? Being where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there, doing what you say you're going to do. All those things, have helped just groom me and teach me so much, right? But the podcast specifically, when we decided to do the podcast, it was a massive undertaking, right? It was, to do 7 shows a week. I spoke, and I'm sure you probably did this as well, just like I did. I talked to so many people who were already doing a podcast, said, can you tell me about it, right? You don't even know what to ask then, before you really get started. And all of them stressed how much work it was. I can't find guests, or, the show notes, or whatever. And the thing they all had in common was they were doing a weekly show. And so that really made me start to question, right? Wait a minute, maybe I should really rethink this. And again, I had a good mentor, and he just said, "Oh, that's why you have to do it, because it's too much work, and most people are not going to do it." So so I was like, okay, right, I'm back in there. I'm going to do it. I don't care what those people say. I'm gonna figure this out. But I'd already seen it happen for my mentor, who also had a daily real estate show, and I was the second one that at that time anyway. I don't know how many there are now in real estate, but I already saw it work, right? And so it wasn't like I was trying to reinvent the wheel here. I did have to build my own systems, my own processes, all those things for the most part. However, I already saw the model work. I'm like, okay, I'm willing to work just as hard. I'm willing to make it happen. I'm willing to, put the time in, essentially. And so that was the commitment then. And we sold our farm. We sold another business. We sold, everything, to make that happen. So it was that level of commitment for me to just cut everything off and say, okay, this is what we're doing. I'm going to make this happen. So it was not an option to turn back.
Yeah. And I want to highlight that too. Like, I think that takes extreme courage, because I've too went through that, do I start a podcast? What's the podcast going to be about? Like, who do I interview? Like, all those same questions. And I just came to the kind of the same conclusion as you did. Like, you can see it working for other people. It's not, it's not this pie in the sky. It actually works for people. It's a proven model, like you said. And I'm very much a person that looks for like what's already worked for other people and try like either put my own spin on it or just, plug and play into that system. So for you, like, the podcast worked, and it sounds like that, like before you had any commercial multifamily. When I started my podcast, I didn't have any commercial multifamily. And I think that like it takes big kahunas to make that show about multifamily if you don't have any multifamily yet. But just like you're saying, it's assuming the role, it's being professional. And I had Tim Kelly on the podcast. I don't even think it's aired yet at this point, but he was saying like he became a multifamily investor before he ever had any multifamily, to then like be seen as that professional and seen, as somebody in that role. Did you see the same thing? Like, once you created that identity for yourself, everything started to happen for you?
So no doubt, that's very well said, by him. It is, the podcast just allows you to speak to so many people, right? Even though you're not having a real conversation one-on-one, I have investor calls every week. Many of them will say, oh, it's the first time we've ever spoken, but they'll say, oh, I've listened to you for a year. I listen to you every morning, in the gym or on my way to work or whatever. And they hear my voice, right? Or they say, oh, I feel like I already know you. Or they talk for 20 minutes and I say, I'm happy to have another call, but I'm going to have to get to the next call pretty soon. and they're like, oh, it's okay. I feel like I already know you, and so that is why we do the podcast, right? That trust that I
build a
gained.
relationship.
That's right. It's building a relationship after them just hearing me, every day, and over a long period of time. And then when we do finally get to talk, they get to ask any other details, that maybe they don't know about me or the business or deals or whatever. And so, but we're so much further ahead. It's not like we just met, downtown walking by each other for the first time. And it's that awkwardness. They've already heard me for a long time. And so they feel like they already know me.
Yeah. And I think that's like any content. Really, I think podcast is a really unique one because especially if you do a daily show, you can just get out there consistently and, be kind of the expert, really giving the value to people. But it doesn't have to be a podcast, right? If you're listening to this, like you say, okay, I want to do something like that, but I don't want to start a podcast. Like I just genuinely do not want to sit in front of a microphone and do this. Well, I mean, you can go start a meetup or start a blog or, start a YouTube channel, whatever that is your way to put yourself out there. It's kind of like virtual networking just through the tools that you have at your disposal. So there's a ton of ways you can still kind of have this effect without the podcast. So I like that we're speaking about this one because I think the podcast is a really good medium, Whitney, and you've obviously seen it help you and your company scale up. So I get quickly before we get off this topic and transition, like to do that daily show and to do this while you're trying to get properties. And now that you have properties, can you talk about like how you built the team just to start, like hit the ground running when you began that?
Yes, and our team's very different now than it was when I started. Very different. However, in the very beginning, it was I knew, and here's one way that I think almost way overcommitting helped me in a big way. Right? If I had said I was going to do a weekly podcast or bi-weekly podcast, I would have tried to have done everything. I would have been trying to edit the shows, the video, the audio, the show notes. Trying to do as much of that as I possibly can. I wouldn't have been able to keep up. It would have been much poorer quality, than it was, I'm sure. It's just not my specialty, right? And so I think I would have probably quit, or I just would not have been able to keep up. So saying, okay, I'm going to do 7 a week, I already knew from the very beginning I couldn't do it all. There's no way, right? There's no way. So I had to build the team from the very beginning. So I had 4 VAs from all over the world, and then I also had another assistant that was actually in the same state. That wasn't planned that way, but I wanted somebody in the States that was my more right hand. But then she helped me manage all these people, right? And then they all did something different for the podcast, whether it's audio or video editing or show notes or website, whatever. They are finding guests. They all did something different, and so she helped me manage them. And then that's what it took. We got 60 days ahead before we ever launched, and that because I knew there would be hiccups as well, right? I knew there would be problems, and so we would have to either change a team member or learn, or train or things like that. And we wanted to be able to have some buffer there for when that happened. But having that team was crucial. I mean, we had to have it, and that was the early success, was having the right people on the team to make that happen.
Yeah, and I think that's important. Point to make, because even if you're doing a weekly show or maybe you're hosting a meetup, like putting those systems in place, whether it's a VA or a team of people you pay, or just like writing, maybe it's a checklist or maybe it's software, like thinking about those systems up front so that you can use your time most efficiently, so that you can go and actually pursue what your end goal is, right? Like the end goal for you, Whitney, wasn't, hey, I want to make the best podcast ever. It's, I want to have this podcast to help with the multifamily side of thing and the networking and everything. So I think that's really important to kind of think had the end in mind and set it up that way. So that's really good. And after this, you got the podcast up and running. What came next?
It was a lot of the same then, right? Learning how to manage my calendar just in ways I never thought, I never imagined. Just managing a family, growing family at the same time. We were going through our 3rd adoption process at that time. And we moved, like I said, we sold the farm. And that, just was another mess in itself. But, just all that dynamic of moving to a different place in a neighborhood we would prefer not to be in, and just trying to make that sacrifice to make it happen. Then it just took consistency. And that's the hard part too, is like so many long days turning into very long weeks, turning into very long months after month after month after month. It's not only hard on me, but it's just as hard on the family. Think about that, right? It's, what kind of commitment here is this going to take to make this happen for me to be 100% in And is my spouse, also 100% in on this as well? Are they ready for me to be that involved, in making this happen and really be able to see the vision long term that it's not going to be forever, that I'm going to have to work 2 full-time jobs or more, right? But it is going to be for a while, and when you got 2 to 3 children, in the house too, that's a lot, right? To expect of your spouse. So that was a lot. That was a big undertaking, right? For us to just make all that happen, keep the family going, with just a crazy schedule, from very early till very late, 5 to 6 days a week, and just traveling a lot. And all that before, we ever did our first syndication for a long time.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've had that same kind of struggle. I think we talked about this a little bit on your show when I was a guest there, but yeah, have like getting your family behind it. And for me right now, my wife and I don't have kids yet, but just that dynamic in our own relationship has been the hard one to wrap around. And really anybody with a significant other, I think, Whitney, you did it the right way, is having that conversation up front. Like, are we ready for this? Can we do this together? And I think I kind of mine wasn't as smooth, right? We probably should have.
I wouldn't say I did it probably as well as I should have, but we did talk about it, of course, because obviously selling the farm's a big deal.
That's a big life decision.
And I think
bridges. You have to.
Yeah, and that was it. I had to be just completely committed. But I think too, you don't know what you don't know. You don't realize the commitment ahead that it's really going to take as much as you think.
I really just love the fact that you made the commitment, that you in a very real way, metaphorically burn the bridges. Like, this is our path. This is what's going to lead towards success. And man, that's so good. If other people would just dive in, feet first and just do it. Like you're saying, the action is the most important thing. So going from that point, you kind of have the systems in place, right? Obviously you're managing and you're tweaking and figuring out your new schedule. Your life's kind of changed at that point, but how does all this lead to your first apartment deal, right? I want to get into the juicy stuff that, people can take away. They said, okay, all of this led up to getting that first deal. Let's talk about that one.
Yeah. I would say long before all that obviously was, and I know everybody listening hears a lot about mindset. Maybe you read things about mindset, all those things. I think the military and law enforcement, federal, all that stuff helped me with that a lot. But if that's not right, you're just not going to do it. You're just not going to make it, most likely. And so, in starting a business and really, performing, because it's so difficult. But one big thing was structuring my day, structuring my morning in a big way. All of those things, those consistent daily things, are what led up to big things. And one big thing too is I hired a mentor. I knew that it wasn't. I knew that would help speed things up, right? That would help give me confidence. That would help me to have somebody there I could ask questions of that had been there and done that. And that's what it did in a big way. So many times I would go to him and say, hey, what about this? And he would just, in just a few words, help me to regain focus, in one way or another, or give me just a little guidance, which was so helpful. But I ended up partnering with him on the first couple of projects, right? So I found somebody that was already very experienced, already had a great track record already. So many things there, like they already had. I didn't have to do that, right? I didn't have to even call a broker for that first deal, right? Because my focus was the investor relations. My focus was the brand at that time. I'm doing a lot more now, but still to get started, especially doing a daily podcast, that was some big steps that helped me to get there. The podcast was obviously just so instrumental, and doing it 7 days a week has just helped us to move forward so much faster. If you can imagine, your network, increasing by 1 guest a week versus 7 a week, you think about that, right? The podcast
you probably learned a lot more, right? Too, because you're diving into all these topics on the show. Yeah. Getting a lot of experience over that.
Exactly. So I'm interviewing 7 times as many people as most guests. So not only is it more connections, but it's just also more times that I get to ask questions of what I'm working on at the moment, right? Maybe the listeners don't know it or whatever, but I get to ask, right? I get to say, well, how did you do this? And they get to share, right? And so I get to help promote them while they're helping me and they don't even know it. We've done almost 900 interviews in the last few years, and so that's just exploded our network, right? And helped me to meet so many people in this business. But getting that first deal, having the right mentor, really pushing to grow my network, my investor base as fast as possible. I was going to conferences, like 2 to 3 times a month on the weekend. So I'm still working full time, still doing the daily podcast, traveling, flying. They were all somewhere else. There were none local to me. like in driving distance, and so I would travel, fly and go. And so just massive commitment financially as well. Podcasts also cost an absolute fortune to produce, 30 shows a month. And so just extreme commitment on financially as well for our family. And so there just was no option to turn back. Right. But all that to say, that's how I got the first couple deals, was partnering with a mentor.
Yeah. I love that strategy. And I think it's often overlooked because people have it in their minds like, I have to do everything. I have to be the one to find the deal, to capitalize the deal, to manage the deal. But the beauty of multifamily is that it's scalable, and like there's enough meat there to bring on partners and to, create a partnership where you guys can do this together. You don't have to do everything your own. And it sounds like your first deal is very similar to mine. That'll close in a week from now. Knock on wood, everything's good. We got the close date this next week. But that one, I raised capital. I was in investor relations. I didn't find that deal, very similar to yours. So I really like that strategy. And can you talk about how, I don't know, maybe this did happen for you, maybe it didn't, but did that next, like once you got that first big deal, did you see that provide like more credibility to when you're raising for the next one or whatever, your role evolved into? Like, did it help snowball, or was it just like, all right, grind it out for another 6 months till we get one more deal?
I would say it did provide some credibility. Remember, I'd been networking as hard as I could go. And I was going to as many conferences as possible. And I wasn't the one to sit. Actually, the very first conference I ever went to, I'll never forget. I mean, I was the first one in the door. I was up in the very front, very center, all those things. Right. But I quickly learned that the value ultimately to be, you're going to learn a lot there, but the value to be had's in the back when talking to people. So, you're going to meet people, you're going to learn a lot, even from the speakers. But the big thing is networking and meeting people there. There are a lot of investors at those events. The first few deals that I raised money for or partnered on, all my investors came from real estate events. Like that, people say, "Oh, there's no passive investors there." You're wrong. There are lots of passive investors there. Yeah. And so a big thing was learning to network, learning to be able to put yourself out there, learning how to speak to people. Right? It's such a skill that's lost. Now I'm trying to teach my boys this. I've been trying to teach them this since they were 3 years old, how to look at people in the eye and shake their hand and those things. And so those skills go a long way, believe it or not. But then also sharing something that's personable about yourself, or more personal than, just real estate or just multifamily. That went a long way. I didn't see that and plan that in the beginning, but sharing our why, our mission, all those things behind Life Bridge Capital. Like I said, I didn't plan that. The Lord had a bigger plan for those things. And so when I would start to share about those things, obviously people I'm talking to would see the passion, right, that I would have about this. But it also gave them a way to remember me, right? So they're going to talk to 200 people there about multifamily. Guess what? Next week when you call them, if you do, most people don't follow up at all, which is a big mistake. But if you do, they're not going to have a clue who you are. However, if you have some way, some passion in it, something that you showed, why you're different than everybody else, they're probably going to remember you.
Yeah, you're going to stick out. Yeah, I remember this book. It was written by Brene Brown. I forget the title of the book, but it was about like being vulnerable and sharing like vulnerable pieces to be a better leader and to get more buy-in on what you're doing. Have you read the book? It sounds.
I haven't. No.
That's really good. I'll have to put the title in the show notes and maybe it'll come to me, but it's by Brene Brown, about being vulnerable. I forget the title. Very good book though. And it sounds very similar. And I like that what you're saying is like a lot of the early success, even now the continued success is through networking, through meeting people, through building relationships. And right now people might have that excuse. I'm still running a meetup here locally because Florida is just the wild place that COVID doesn't exist. But for those areas that COVID is still a serious thing. It is everywhere. I don't mean to downplay it. But how are you able to network and still meet people during this time?
Now it's as much podcast, as it is anything now. But I am still speaking at events. I spoke, even at like the Best Ever Conference last year's keynote last year at that, and I'm speaking at that again this year. But unfortunately, this year it's virtually. But still, a lot of events like that are helping me to get in front of a lot of new investors. The podcast has obviously gained a lot more steam, over the last year or so, and that's helpful as well, of course. But then, I think speaking at meetups, meeting people just like yourself, that are doing things and having podcasts. I'm being interviewed on more podcasts all the time. We have a massive list of people that have requested me to be on their show. So, we're trying to go through those. And so there's that's a big way, right? I mean, social media is a big way. I personally, and this may seem crazy, but I personally am rarely on social media. And so even though we have a daily podcast, our team handles almost all of that, except, personal comments, I do try to respond to those things. But I just hate wasting time on social media for myself.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I see it as like a necessary evil.
It is a necessary evil. It is. I know people have made massive businesses on social media, and I guess I ultimately have as well built a following on there, an investor base, all those things. However, I personally hate spending time on there, but it's a way to meet people. It is, but I love getting on the phone then with those investors. And a lot of things have improved. Obviously our website, and we're doing lots of other things now to generate leads to the website, and then just our entire nurturing process after that has changed. It's so much better now than it's ever been, and we're just improving it constantly. And so that's a little bit about some things that have changed, but or kind of where we're at now.
That's really good. I want to dig into that a little bit because I think, like we were talking about earlier, like I ask questions that'll benefit me and hopefully everybody listening will get them. So I'm having when you want to take somebody from, a listener or something, or you want to nurture that relationship, how are you funneling people, from your podcast or whatever it is into having relationships where you can then like benefit them and actually build a relationship and not just be like, a guy on their phone or on their screen or whatever?
Yeah. So how do we get people in our system, and then how do we probably convert them into an investor? Now it's a lot different, like I said, than it used to be. But podcast is a big one. People share this, share our show all over the place, and so that's helpful in meeting people. It builds instant credibility, all those things, right? Getting people. Now we're doing SEO. Now we're doing lots of lead gen stuff that are a lot bigger than I could ever done in the past. But now, I have somebody on my team that is full-time investor, like admin. Like she is completely committed to, like, I call it the investor life cycle. And so she, that is her focus. Like what happens with that investor from the day they sign up, and so my assistant and I really handle getting, and actually somebody else manages the podcast. But then my assistant and I really manage, getting the investors to the website, right? Getting them signed up. And then as soon as they sign up, they receive a call from our team, from that lady that I was telling you about, that day, and maybe within the hour, things like that. And so they get a call, and then she schedules them, to talk to me. Then we have a call. And during that time, they're getting certain emails that tell them about me, and our team and our business and things like that. And then after, they're still getting different things that talk about different projects that we've done or whatever, about multifamily and passive investing. And so educating them, right? It's short stuff, but that's usually all people will pay attention for, and they appreciate it being really short. But it's numerous things, that they get. So we just kind of stay in front of them, but it's adding just a little bit of value, enough for them to say, to teach them something, right? Hopefully. Many of them are very sophisticated investors, and have been investing longer than I've been alive. But they still appreciate some of these things, about the syndication business that may be new to them, that they're not used to or have learned in the past. But it's those things that, that personalized touch. One guy said the other day, I can't believe I'm getting to talk to you. I thought for sure I would get to talk to some investor relations person. I'm like, no, I talk to every investor, before, they ever get on our investor list. They have I talk to them personally. And so, and I'm wide open. I give my phone number out, and they know they can text me or call or email at any time.
That's really good. So just from like a systemized thinking about this, it starts out by them listening to the podcast or visiting the website, whatever that is, however they initially become aware of, you, Whitney, through all these different things. And then they input their information to receive a piece of value, like go through a lead magnet, correct? And then somebody on your team who manages that whole process is then calling them to nurture them further and then set up a call with you. Do I understand the process?
Yeah, that's very accurate. There's a few lead magnets we've used, and that's changing, pretty regular. How often? However,
can you explain what a lead magnet is and what its purpose is?
Yeah, it's just some way to add value to somebody that allows you to get their email, right? In exchange for their email address, you're adding some value to them. You're providing something you've created, that is something they want to know. Right. It could be about passive investing. It could be how to vet a syndicator. It could be about commercial real estate or a market, there's so many things you can create a lead magnet on, but it has to be something that they want to know about. Right. Yeah. And so in exchange for their email, right, because you got to email it to them, you're going to give them this document or this thing you create. It could be all kinds of things, but usually it's like some kind of PDF or or in real estate, a lot of times people create their own calculator, to underwrite deals or something like that they're giving away. Yeah. Right. So this person gives you
basically just to give people value so that
that's right.
Like, hey, here's something for free rather than, hey, come in and like spend some money. No, here's something that'll help and it's free.
Something that they think, oh, I got to have that, or that could help me with my problem, right? Whatever that is. Yeah. But not always. I mean, people can sign up on my contact us page too. And they're going to, they're actually going to talk to me a lot faster that way. The other way, they're just going to be nurtured for a while. They still have to sign up one way or the other.
Yeah. No, that's good. No, I think that's the first time I've heard of somebody like signing up for something like that and then getting a call to, get nurtured a little bit and then actually schedule a call with you. So maybe I gotta get.
So we've tested this and we've tested this. We've signed up on lots of people's lists and I don't try to hide it. I mean, we've signed up just to see what would happen. How are other people following up, right?
Other people's processes.
And I mean, I signed up with some really big name people and we barely got an email, so part of me is like, well, what do you expect to happen? And so, I don't know. I was kind of disappointed that I didn't have a lot more follow-up. Right. And so, we've created lots of things, but I was actually trying to use a different service. I can't even remember what it was now. But it's completely outside of real estate, but I signed up on their website and I mean, like within minutes, I got a phone call from somebody. Like it wasn't, some robot. It was somebody saying, hello, Whitney. And I was like, whoa. I mean, that was impressive. Yeah. And I'm like, we got to do that. So that, it wasn't my idea, but I'm like, it makes so much sense. It's that personalized touch that somebody, called me right then. I've heard other people doing this different ways as well now, but it's so personalized, hello, Whitney, I saw you have interest in investing with us. We want to get you scheduled to talk to Whitney, as soon as possible, is Thursday at, 9 a.m. Does that work for your schedule?
I like that because if you think about somebody going on your website and actually filling out one of those forms, it's probably because they're interested in that moment. And then like, if you just knowing where attention spans are in the world today, right. Like if you can get to them right away while they're still interested, while that piece
that's the important
content is still valuable to them,
right.
A week from now, it might not be like, oh, I'm on from syndication. I don't want to do that anymore. But if you can reach out to them right away, that's really good. I like that.
But believe it or not, passive investors, especially the ones that are very sophisticated, take a lot of attention to that. But a lot of other things that you do, how fast do you follow up? How professional are you? In every detail. Okay. Because often I hear, man, I loved your follow-up process. I loved that, somebody called me right away, or just the fact that you can operate a daily podcast while doing all these other things shows me that you're very organized. Like all those things are a reflection of what you're doing in your business, right? And especially how you follow up with an investor. It's so crucial. I did it very poorly early on because I was so busy with the podcast. I have time to build that out. But I wish that before I even launched the podcast, I'd have had a better follow-up system to nurture investors. But I didn't know that at the time. I was so consumed with doing a daily podcast. It's a lot better now, but it took us a while to get there. But yeah, so important to follow up and follow up.
As you can tell, I started out the same way. And then that's kind of the position I'm in now, is trying to find a way to, all right, now people are coming in from this and it's probably good I start giving them, value or having conversations or something like that with them so that they're not, so I'm not one of those other people that never follow up when they
that's right.
Get their information. No, that's good. And just quickly too, because I'm interested in this. How have you gone to monetize the podcast? Because I know that you said to produce it, it's pretty expensive. You put out 30 shows a day. So that's like a big effort. So how does that process look?
Yeah. So monetizing a podcast, there's a lot of people that have done a lot better job at that than I am, than I have. And I tell people, if you look at a profit and loss statement for my podcast and it's all you knew, you would say, what in the world are you doing? This is crazy, that you spent this much on that. Right. And especially for the first, year and a half, or so. Most people would have quit, okay, because it's so expensive and it hasn't paid anything, right? I have had sponsors. We did create a nice, thing to show sponsors what we could do for them, lay it out very nicely, professionally, those things. And then also, I have a podcast manager now, and part of her job is finding new sponsors and marketing to them and things like that. But I didn't have that, for a long, long, long time. But I did have people that wanted to sponsor the show. And so I did create some 3 different packages, this is what I can do for you. This is, you'll get, this many times a month. And, that we'll do a 15-second or 30-second or 60-second ad. I record an ad for you. And then, it's placed in certain shows, whether it's a pre-roll, mid-roll, post-roll ad, meaning beginning or mid or, after the interview, one way or the other. And those have been helpful. But I would say that for me, I mean, like I said, I know there's people that have monetized their shows so much better than I have. But for me, that's not been very lucrative on the podcast side. Like I said, if you just looked at the P&L, right? Because we're doing so many shows. If we're doing a weekly show,
I think it's a delicate balance too, because I don't know. I think when you hear a show that does ads well and then a show that doesn't, you tell. And as a listener, you're like, I don't like the way they're coming at me with all these ads. But a podcast that does ads well, you don't mind them as a listener. You maybe fast forward with them or maybe listen to them, whatever it is. But you want to make it seem like you're providing value. And that's why I've hesitated, because I just want to give people value and not, throw spam at people. So
for sure. And it's so much more on the investor side or that's what's going to monetize for you, like building your credibility, building your investor base, all those things it's hard to connect. People say, has it been worth it? And I can say, absolutely. Yes. By far is so obvious in so many ways. I've been invited to be parts of masterminds for free. I've been invited to speak in front of thousands of people as keynote speakers, all these things, right? I've made so many connections. I mean, we have people partnering with us now that everybody on the show would know of, and you wouldn't believe it. I mean, it's like all those things because of just being as professional as possible, being as consistent as possible, and doing a daily podcast, and just branding that way.
Yeah, that's really good. I like that. And I'm glad of where that discussion went, because it's good things to think about behind building your brand. If that's a podcast, I think that's a great way. But like I was saying earlier, it could be a slew of different things within your brand that you use to give out value to people. So before we transition here, because of this podcast, what does your portfolio look like today? I mean, it seems like that's been a big growth point as it's got bigger and you get more downloads and everything else. You got more investors coming in. So I'm sure there's more successes on the real estate side as well.
For sure. It's hard to believe, but yes, I mean, we closed 100 million last year in real estate. We have about 150 million under management right now.
And when did just for context, when did you start the podcast?
Well, I can tell you
900 shows. So 3.5 years ago.
Yeah. It's about 3 years ago.
So,
a little less. 3 years. Obviously we're way ahead in recordings, but
yeah. And then, in 2020, 100 million. That's awesome. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think you said this earlier because, I had a guy, I was speaking at an event one time and he brought me up on stage because he wanted to make the point to everybody that I started the podcast about syndication before I ever had done a syndication. And most people would say, oh, that's crazy. You're not an expert. And I'm like, you're exactly right. That's why I'm interviewing all the experts, right? So yep. It's all about your mindset, right? You can, and that's the thing too. If you're fixing to step out and do something like this, you're going to be told so many times you can't do it, or you don't know how to do this yet, or all those things, but you know what? You got to look past all that, and you got to just keep focusing forward. I was told that so many times too. It's like, you can't do this. I mean, what's he doing? Right. I mean, I did hear that. What's he doing? He's starting a show about syndication. He's never even done one before. I'm like, you're right.
Why I'm starting the show. Yeah,
that's right. I'm going to add value and, all those things. So anyway.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what led me into starting this show and why I branded it like I did. It's called the Multifamily Journey Podcast, not the Mr. Know-It-All Multifamily Podcast. It's about sharing my journey and giving other people like me in my situation who want to get started tips on making those steps to get there, because I'm making those steps to get there. Definitely no expert in the space, but hopefully, after 3 more years of this, I can maybe say, hey, here's 100 million. I guess that's how you do it. You just start a daily podcast show and you do 100 million, right? That's
right. That's all it is.
Just as easy as that. No, but I think that's really good. And we talked about this on your show last week as well, is when you came to present to our mastermind, when I first got introduced to you and starting a brand, that's what got me to think about it. And man, for the longest time I had imposter syndrome. I was like, I can't start a podcast. Why would people want to listen to me? But then I realized a lot of people, first of all, there's nobody that I know of really that's maybe one other person that's been on the show, Josh Ferrari, that's in this age group, mid 20s that are doing large deals like this. But I know there's other people who want to get there and that are interested in it, because I talk to them all the time. They set up calls, they come to the meetup because they want to get there, but they don't know how. So by listening to, actual experts come on the show and me ask tips ask questions about like how to get through this phase, I think that provides a lot of value. And just like on your show, asking the questions of the experts. So yeah, that's really good stuff. So Whitney, I guess with that, what's in store for the future for you? So you did 100 million last year. What's the goal for 2021 and where you guys headed?
2021. I mean, we did 4 large deals last year, and we hope to do at least 4, if not 6 this year. We'd love to move into another market. We'd love to move into another asset class potentially as well. And so we want to obviously go into another market. We want to increase deal flow. But I mean, we're in 2 great markets right now. But as far as 4 to 6 deals, would be a goal of ours for this current year. We're hoping to have a contract on a property today, actually. So we'll see. We put an offer last week on one, and it seems pretty promising. And we knew like we need one pretty soon. But however, I would say, last year, 2 of those deals we got 10% discounts on, which is $3 million each. Okay, because we were willing to walk away.
Insignificant.
It's extremely significant. So I just encourage you, as you're looking at deals, like be willing to walk away. Because we don't have to do a deal, thankfully now to feed our families. So we will walk away, but that's allowed us to get better deals. But all I'd say,
let's talk about that real quick before we transition to the last section of the show. Let's talk about how you got that discount or how you got those discounts on those properties.
So one big way, and this is so important, is not only just tell a broker that this is what I'll pay for it, or how about this much, whatever, right? Show them why, right? Like, I mean, show them, right? Print out your underwriting, whatever, and explain it to them in detail, right? Show them that you know what you're talking about, right? And you're not going to do it in a cocky way, right? Because they are usually, not always, but usually very educated as well. They've probably underwritten more deals than most people trying to get into this business, right? Yeah. But show them, how you got to your number, and then even ask them, say, what would you change here? But ultimately that's what we did. We laid out in great detail. This is how we got to this price. This is why we are set on this price. This is what it is worth to us, and then in twice, okay, the broker says, nope, that won't buy it. Thank you. Have a good day. Right. And it goes under contract with another group, and for whatever reason falls out of contract. One was, because of COVID, I think, another because they couldn't get financing, whatever, right? It falls out. Guess who they call back, right? They knew we could close. They knew we could raise the money. They knew all those things. They'd worked with us before. And so they call back, say, one of them said, we'd really like you to make another offer. And we're like, what we'll pay, we showed you, right? Yeah. And
it shows some competence. Like it shows
that's right.
You've done your homework and
we know this is what it's worth to us. Right. And we can close, and I would say too, our team was a big thing there because our property management company had managed that property before, like many years ago. So they knew lots of things about that property. And so that was so beneficial, so beneficial.
Like boots on the ground. That's
I mean, it was so crucial in knowing certain things about that property. But, and having that insight for that one property, we didn't about the other, but being willing to walk away. And then when they came back, it was a few months later. And guess what? We got to see financials again. And we got to see that the occupancy was dropping. We could see there was a problem. Right. Yeah. So we got to see financials like 3 different times before we actually put a contract on the property. And that was so
that tells the story. Right? That tells how it's actually happening, right? Not one snapshot in time, but you plotted the graph.
That's right. That's right. And so, and it even bolstered what we'd already said to the broker.
Man. Yeah. I think that's a super valuable tip. I do that with all my offers. I forget where I got that tip from, but even if you never get that deal, like, right, if you give that feedback, and don't end up getting the deal, if it, gets under contract with another group and they end up closing it, well, you still built rapport with that broker. You still showed competence to that broker. You still gave them feedback and had this discussion and laid out, all this for them. So like, okay, at least he knows his stuff. If this, if we've got another one, he showed us some competence. So we'll at least give him the opportunity on the next deal. So I have seen that help as well, though it's not, resulted in a $3 million discount yet. So maybe on the next one. No, but I love being in acquisition mode, and that excites me that you guys are talking about doing 4 to 6 large deals this year, another 100 million or more. I just put in my largest offer yet at $5.5 million. It's just exciting. So I'm waiting to hear back on that one.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
The offer's in. Nothing else other than that. But it's exciting. Being in acquisition mode just gets me going. Like I just feel like I don't know. I always got this like anxiety inside me. Like, all right, want this deal. So yeah, it's fun stuff. All right, Whitney, let's transition to the last section of the show now. This is the
Fortune 5.
All right, Whitney, this is the 5 questions I ask every guest, every show. So to kick it off, what's the biggest thing that's contributed to your success?
The Lord, number one, without a doubt. I could not have planned all these things to happen. Other than that, I know you said one, but I would say the Lord, my wife and her support, no doubt about it. And then just increasing my network as fast as possible and just the commitment level of doing that and what it took to get there.
Oh man, super good stuff. That's a great answer. Number 2 here, what's your biggest mistake so far that's turned into a learning lesson?
That first property. It was a massive mistake, massive brain damage. I say, around
Is this the first
deal.
syndication or one of like the
first?
No.
The first 2 triplexes I bought in 2009. They were, my wife and I had just been married like a year. And you talk about like just giving you a good test for your marriage, just right off the bat.
That'll do it.
Man, we were remodeling a house at the same time. It was a mess, but anyway, we learned a lot, just within our marriage and then also, but about real estate. That taught us so much right there.
Yeah. Nothing like going through some serious stress with another person to strengthen that bond. It's like basic training, but you just did it with your wife.
Yeah.
That's funny. All right, Whitney, what's your favorite book that you would recommend to someone starting out?
If it's about syndication and you are new to syndication, Joe Fairless's The Best Ever Apartment Syndication book is hands down the best book about the entire business. There's some other books that are focused on capital raising or the legal side of syndication that are very specific and are very good. But if you just want here's almost a game plan and a lot of knowledge about the syndication business, that's going to help you to get started. That's the best one.
Yeah. I think that's one of the earlier books that I read. Super good book. I would definitely recommend it as well. So outside of, it sounds like you're super busy outside of recording a podcast every day or batching. What do you like to do outside of real estate?
Big on family, always have been. I couldn't for like over 2 years. It was just strictly work, right? My kids knew that Sundays was a day that dad wasn't working and because it was just madness, right? Keeping a schedule like that. Mm-hmm. But now, this morning, like I had my first meeting canceled this morning. And so I'll usually try to exercise really early in the morning. But since I knew they had canceled, I just waited, had more time to read. Okay. Because I was up early. Right. And then I said, told my wife, I said, hey, how about I get the boys up and let's all go on a walk early this morning. Right. It's things like that. Like it's just incredible. It's just the blessing of being an entrepreneur now and working towards where we're at now. My wife and I just love being able to homeschool and to be able to go on that walk this morning. I mean, like that is why I did all that for 2.5 years, just madness, right? So I can have that amazing time with them, but getting back into horses now too.
That's awesome. Yes. Sometimes it's the small pleasures. So I love that answer. Me and my wife love doing the same thing with our dog. So on the horses, are you riding 2 at a time yet, standing up on their backs, or is that past?
Hey, I sold many horses when I was training. That was like a second full-time business, but every one of them that I sold, I stood up on their back and popped whips in both hands. So
I can picture it now. That should be the cover of the podcast. Is like
it should be
syndication show emblem around it with you just whipping 2 horses.
I even had a few that could lay down on their side with nothing on them. I would stand on them while they're laying down, and I'd pop whips in both hands, throw tarps over their head, all kinds of stuff. So most people, nobody's ever heard that in real estate before. Just so you know, that's new for your show.
Whitney, the equine master, is on the show today. That's awesome. Well, Whitney, thanks so much for coming on the show and giving value, and so impressive what you've done over the last couple of years with your brand and everything, and of course the real estate portfolio. So I think people got a lot out of the show. I know I did. I was taking notes, writing stuff down. So thanks a bunch for coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure, Blake.
All right, and we're out of here. Hey, thanks for listening. If you like the show, if you found value in it, please go to iTunes and leave a rating and review. And if you want to check out more on your multifamily journey, go to multifamilyjourney.com, where you can get free resources to start your journey and figure out your path. That's multifamilyjourney.com. But more importantly, go take action today towards your financial future. See you next time.